Today we will be discussing cognitivism. Cognitivism is a theory that focuses on cognitive processes. Within a cognitive classroom, learners work closely with the teacher. Prior knowledge is linked to new problems. Students seek to find meaning in their new information. Students learn to use higher level thinking, and students learn to analyze their own understanding. This presentation will cover three different ideas within cognitivism from the theorists Jean Piaget, Richard Mayer, John Brown, Alan Collins, and Paul Duguid. It will also cover how it is used in the classroom and some advantages and disadvantages of cognitivism. Jean Piaget was one of the leading psychologists involved in researching cognitive development or thinking about how people learn. His studies gave insight into how the mind is able to receive and process new information. The main way Piaget discussed processing of information was through the idea of schema, or a simple building block of knowledge or information. Over time, people would acquire new knowledge and modify their schema to help them better process the new information they are taking in. It is said that learners organize information by relating it to what they have previously learned and apply it to appropriate situations. Piaget also focused on the growth of a knowledge base through modifying current schemata that an individual has. The first step in taking in new information is all about assimilation. This process requires for the individual as they take in the new information to try and fit it into an already existing knowledge base. Sometimes this isn't the case, though, with new information, and the schemata have to be reworked in order to find understanding. This leads to the changing of current schemata, which is known as accommodation. Equilibration is all about bringing in the new information, adjusting what exists, and reaching the point of having a new schema that can eventually be changed once again when new knowledge is gained. Part of Piaget's theory on cognitive development dealt with the specific cognitive development stages that all children go through in a sequential order. The first stage is the sensory motor stage, where children are capable of the idea of object permanence. This concept involves the idea where if an object is shown to a child and removed, the child will know that the object is gone, showing they have a mental representation of the object in their mind. Although Piaget didn't assign ages for each stage at the time of his theory, this is said to happen between ages 0 to 2. The next stage is the preoperational stage, where children around the ages of 2 to 7 start to develop the ability to use symbols in place of another object. The third stage of development is known as the concrete operational stage, where children around the ages of 7 to 11 will be able to start using logic to complete more concrete tasks, such as the ideas of conservation of mass or numbers. Even though appearance of objects may be arranged differently, the child can still see they are the same. The final stage, then, is the formal operational stage. This stage is one that may possibly never be reached by some people. It can start around the age of 11 or above and is a stage where people can think abstractly about ideas and are able to formulate and test their own hypotheses. Richard E. Mayer is a professor of psychology at the University of California, Santa Barbara. His research is based on applying the science of learning to education. According to his biography at UC Santa Barbara, his research is at the intersection of cognition, instruction, and technology. Overall, Mayer's goal is to study research-based principles of instructional design and contribute to cognitive science about how people learn. The multimedia learning theory focuses on three main assumptions. First, dual channel. This is where people have separate channels for processing visual and verbal material. Second, limited capacity. This is where people can only process small amounts of material in each channel at one time. Third, active processing. This is where meaningful learning occurs when learners attend to relevant information, organize it, and integrate it with prior knowledge. Mayer states, people learn better from words and pictures than from words alone. The chart below is research done by Mayer, clearly displaying that people learn more with narration and animation than narration only. People learn more with text and illustrations than only text. Dr. Mayer has a goal in mind for using multimedia instruction efficiently, following three demands. First, reduce extraneous processing, the cognitive processing that does not support the objective of the lesson. Second, manage essential processing. This is the basic cognitive processing that is required to represent the material. And third, foster generative processing. This is deep cognitive processing required to make sense of the material. The reduce extraneous processing principles are as followed. The coherence principle. This leaves out extraneous material from instruction. Basically, just get to the point. The signaling principle. This is when cues are added to highlight the main ideas during instruction. The redundancy principle. This includes animation and narration only during presentation of new material. The spatial contiguity principle. This states that keeping text closer together rather than far apart on the screen is more effective for learners. The picture to the right gives an example using the water cycle. The new words, condensation, evaporation, and precipitation, should be integrated with their definitions close to the word. The second presentation follows the spatial contiguity principle. Finally, the temporal contiguity principle. This is where graphics and narration during a presentation are shown simultaneously rather than successively. The following here are the managing essential processing principles. The first is the segmenting principle. This states that people learn better when a narrated animation is presented in learning-paced segments rather than continuous. The pre-training principle. This is where people learn better when they have had training in the main concepts and are able to activate prior knowledge. And finally, the modality principle. This states that graphics and narration are more effective than graphics and on-screen text. Lastly, we have the fostering generative processing principles. First is the personalization principle. This states that presentation delivery needs to be in spoken words that are conversational rather than formal. The second is the voice principle. This means that narration needs to be spoken in a standard accented human voice rather than a machine voice. The link below is a quick summary to go along with Mayer's theory of multimedia learning. John Brown, Alan Collins, and Paul DeGoey came up with the theory of situated cognition. They emphasize that people's knowledge is constructed and linked to activities and context in which it is learned. They believe that knowledge can only be gained through use. They also believe that learning is something that should be social and not isolated. Learning takes place through discussion, shared knowledge, and problem solving. They called this a cognitive apprenticeship. A cognitive apprenticeship is when a novice learner interacts with an expert and important skills and experiences are shared. The novice learner learns the stages in which they must go through to become an expert. The video link goes into more detail to explain how this relationship creates a let me do and I understand approach. Brown, Collins, and DeGoey came up with 9 guidelines to go by when implementing situated cognition and the cognitive apprenticeship. Students should be taught authentic content that will be used in real life. Activities should be chosen with real-world relevance. Students should have access to expert thinking. There should be multiple roles and perspectives presented. The classroom should be organized into small groups. Students need to reflect and compare with experts. Students should publicly present arguments. Students need a complex and open learning environment. And finally, there needs to be multiple indicators of learning or assessments. A cognitive classroom focuses on what students know and how they come to know it. The student is considered an active participant in the learning process. The learning environment allows for students to make connections. The learning begins by activating the student's prior knowledge to make a connection to the subject. Then the students learn through instructional explanations, demonstrations, and illustrative examples. Lastly, there is a huge emphasis on structuring, organizing, and sequencing information. A main idea of a cognitive classroom is the organization of student learning. Some strategies that help create organization of thoughts are framing, outlining, mnemonics, concept mapping, and advanced organizers. One example of an advanced organizer is a Venn diagram. A Venn diagram can be used to not only organize thoughts, but also activate prior knowledge by comparing something that they know already to something they are learning. Another main idea of a cognitive classroom is pulling on the prior knowledge of the students. Two strategies that can help students use their prior knowledge are analogies and metaphors. These strategies make the information meaningful and help them to organize and relate new knowledge to existing knowledge. There are many advantages to the cognitive learning theory. Learning strategies taught using the cognitive learning approach have been classified into three types that interact with and support each other. By using metacognitive strategies, students can come to understand that they have power over their own learning and can choose to be successful. Examples of this include selective attention, self-management, and advanced organization. By using cognitive strategies, students develop skills that help them achieve academic success, thus increasing their confidence and ability. Examples of this include resourcing, grouping, note-taking, and summarizing. And third, by using social and affective strategies, students come to value teamwork and socially mediated learning. Examples of this include questioning for clarification, cooperation, and self-talk. The cognitive academic language learning approach uses a 5-stage cycle for introducing, teaching, practicing, evaluating, and applying content, language, and learning strategies. The 5 stages are preparation, activating prior knowledge; presentation, conveying new information; practice, students use new information accurately; evaluation, allowing opportunities for students to evaluate their success; and finally, expansion, allowing for opportunities for students to relate content to their culture and the outside world. Each stage is designed to transfer information to students efficiently. The first problem related to cognitivism is that sometimes students will receive knowledge that does not fit into schema that already exists in their mind. Cognitivism is focused on modifying these schema, so if knowledge does not fit, it can be a problem for the learner. Sometimes problems students encounter can be messy and will not have a step-by-step procedure for solving them. The solutions for these types of problems then depend on inventiveness, improvisation, discussion, and social negotiation of the learner. Cognitivism lacks the inclusion of these key features for solving more complex problems. The second problem related to cognitive theory is that it is not really focusing in on what learners are doing, but more so on what they know and how they come to acquire it. Figuring out how students acquire knowledge is extremely important to fit new knowledge into an already existing schema. But we really need to think about the current learners that we have in our classroom. Current findings indicate that doing is now more important than knowing, as this enables the development of a deeper and more authentic understanding of the task at hand. With the introduction of technology, this has allowed children to have access to knowledge right at their fingertips. And these children are more likely to play around with something to find the purpose, as opposed to analyzing the way it's supposed to work. The third problem related to cognitive theory is that the focus of the learning seems to be more so on the individual and their personal experiences rather than in a group context. Studies show that when working in groups, new integrations among existing concepts within and between schemata can be established, alternative integrations to a given situation can be detected, and criteria for judging their validity can be developed. The focus of cognitivism is so much on the individual and what they know that we forget how important learning can be when it is done in a group setting, acknowledging the experiences of our peers. Educational research by Cunningham states that group work shows students how to construct knowledge, promote collaboration when viewing multiple perspectives on an issue, and allows them to arrive at a conclusion themselves while acknowledging different views of others. At the end of our presentation, we wanted to leave you with some questions for further exploration and analysis. First, thinking back to Piaget. According to Piaget's theory of learning, children should not be taught certain concepts until they have reached the appropriate stage of cognitive development. But one question is, what about the children who have cognitive learning disabilities? How do we help teach them the best? And what if children fall into multiple stages of the cognitive development stages of Piaget, or are unable to reach that final stage of development, the formal operations stage?